I also think there's a funny thing, which is there's this history of famous actors, right? So I do think it sort of begins with Brando, because Brando had such an enormous effect on the psychology of men in America. He really like, and if you look at what I would call like the great generation of American actors, the Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro, Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman, Al Pacino, Morgan Freeman, Meryl Streep, like this, the whole that's all like the post-Brando generation. All of those people, literally all of them, wanted to become actors because of Marlon Brando. And he so rewrote the idea of what it was, what it could be. It was like what Bob Dylan did in the culture. It was like it just rewrote the game almost.
Or like what Lenny did with comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Lenny Bruce. And there are these people who come and they have like a kind of a permanent, they're a permanent before and after.
Yes.
In a certain kind of field. You know what I mean? But my point about Brando was just that like he changed the idea of the type of person that male actors wanted to be. Suddenly it was like they wanted to have like a patina or a reputation as a visceral. They wanted to be visceral, not polished. They wanted to be muscular. They wanted to be masculine. They wanted to be, intense. Like those were not the kind of words that people, when you think back on like Jimmy Stewart, Cary Grant, like that is not what that is not what movie stars were aspiring to. They were aspiring to polish, a kind of a polish before Brando, and
there was an
after
authenticity,
was,
right?
Yeah,
there's something to his performances where you go, oh well, this is more like real life than a fit, like on the Waterfront, like the I Could Have Been a Contender thing.
Yeah,
like when he's doing that, you're like, well, this is how someone would actually behave if they felt like their life had been a disaster and it could have been avoided.
Well, you just hit on something though that it drives me nuts, because whenever people sort of talk about Brando, they're like, there's sort of the Stanley Kowalski, the brutal masculinity, etc. The thing about Brando is he is beautiful. He's kind of this enormous Roman-looking guy, but where he really kills is this kind of broken sensitivity that he had. And I Could Have Been a Contender is not a tough guy speech.
Right.
It's the opposite. It's a broken tough guy. It's a guy practically crying, saying like, You were my brother, and you should have looked out for me. I needed you looking out for me, and my life's gone down the toilet because of that. In that moment, you didn't look out for me. It's like tearful. It's not, and even the best moment of Stanley Kowalski in Streetcar is really, it's like when he falls on his knees in front of his wife and cries. You know what I mean? It's like that's what he was way better in. In a lot of ways, to me, it's the fact that he was actually kind of in touch with his emotional life. It's not that he was like so macho at all. It's that he looked that way, but he actually had this like poetic sensitivity. Yes,
and it resonated real, like it felt real.
Yeah.
And if you watch actors before him, there was a certain undeniable theatric element to what they were doing that was like, oh, this guy's acting.
Yeah.
Whereas he seemed like a guy who was really living the scene.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it sounds silly to say the instrument of a person, but he has this crazy, he looks the way he looks, but he's got this marble-mouthed, he's not articulate. He doesn't come off as, like, there's a mushiness to the way he speaks and a kind of a, it doesn't have style. The guys before that, it was, you felt that they were working on their style.
Yeah.
And he seemed to be sort of like scratching his ribs and mumbling and in a T-shirt, and he was kind of present in the moment.
And I think it was all accentuated by the way he ended his life. Like the end of his life, he was enormous.
Yeah.
Gigantic fat guy, and he just given in to all of his vices, and He was just this guy. He was a beautiful man.
Yeah.
He just didn't seem to give a fuck about that at all.
Yeah, I think he said something to me one time about how much he was enjoying his life when he was like 23. And he's like, even when he was doing the play Streetcar that made him famous, he was telling me like he would get with his pal Diego and go up to Harlem, go to clubs and hit on girls and all these things. And I said, you weren't aware of what was going on, And he goes, well, I was aware of a certain amount of noise rising. And then one day I woke up and I was sitting on a pile of candy. That's what and I thought, what a really wild way to say it. And I do think, I'm not even joking, to me, it's like what you said. It was like after that, it was like there was no boundaries. It was like he was getting everything was, he wasn't going to be able to resist. He wasn't disciplined.
Yeah.
He wasn't a super disciplined person. He was a very poetic person. And I don't think he was disciplined. And I think that a lot of what happened, he had like something like 17 children. And he got, he had appetites and he had these things. And I do think that he, struggled to deal with all the things that came with being that famous,